Hello, psychologists. Our topic for this week is language development. We're trying to answer the question, how is language acquired? So, let's find out. You get to see a bunch of cute pictures of babies and little kids. Look how cute they are. It won't go. There we go. Okay, so let's start with babies and infants. We're going to go kind of chronologically. So if we start at 4 months, babies can discriminate between some sounds and can babble. So I don't know if you have little brothers or sisters, or if you have a baby of your own, then you can kind of attest to this. Let's take a look at what that might look like. So here's the baby, reacting to parents. And this is kind of what you would expect from a 4-month-old in terms of language. Adorable, huh? Now, by the time babies are 6 months old, they usually respond to their name. They respond to other human voices, like if you're talking, they turn their head and look at you and that sort of thing. They'll respond appropriately to pleasant or angry tones, depending on, like what your interaction with the baby is. When you get to a 1-year-old, though, 1-year-old can use one, maybe a couple words with intent. Like no, mom, dad. I don't know what your first word was. One of my first ones was purple. I called everything purple. I don't know why. It's just what my mom tells me. A 1-year-old can understand simple instructions. Like go over there, that sort of thing. A 1-year-old understands inflection, so it's a slightly more sophisticated use of pleasant or angry tones. The baby can pick up on your inflection. So let's take a look at what a 1-year-old sounds like, and kind of compare it with the 4-month-old. Let's try the 1-year-old.
I'm cute.
I'm cute.
I'm strong.
I'm dumb.
I'm big.
Big.
Hi.
Hi.
Bye.
Bye.
이강국.
네.
이강국.
네.
이강국.
네.
이강국.
네.
What's your name?
지지.
What's your name?
지지.
Jason. Jason. How old are you?
아야야.
Jason. How old are you?
아야야.
So you can tell, right, that the kid is speaking, and you can tell some words, right? But there are a lot of words that you can't tell, right? That only parents can kind of understand, that they know the meaning behind, right? Because they've been teaching their kid, they've been interacting with their kid, right? And they kind of get them. So when they're 1 years old, you may not be able to tell necessarily what the kid is saying all the time, and that happens all the way up through, some 2 or 3-year-olds. But once again, adorable. All right, so let's go on from the 1-year-old. When you get to be 1.5, you have a vocabulary of between 5 and 20 words or so, typically. And kids develop this really cool thing called echolalia, which is repeating a sound over and over again. So you'll see kids and hear kids sort of mimic you like a parrot, sort of, and then repeat a sound over and over and over again. Because what they're doing is testing it out, and they're trying to get a sense of what the sound feels like to say, what the sound actually means. They're looking for your reaction to the sound, right? So, if you teach kids swear words at this age, you're going to hear it over and over and over again. Or if you accidentally swear around the kid and the kid repeats it over and over and over again, that's kind of a feature of this stage in their life. When the kid becomes 2, we're increasing the vocabulary. So in this 6-month period, we're going from saying 5, 10, 20 words to, between 150 and 300. So it's a big, growth period. And the interesting thing about having kids, if you haven't had any of your own, or if you don't have little siblings, is that you can see the growth in kids in really short amount of time at this stage in their life, especially with vocabulary and that sort of thing. The other cool thing is later on when they're a little bit older, when reading clicks for them, that's a kind of a cool stage too because it's kind of frustrating as they're sounding out words and they don't know how things are, and then all of a sudden this light goes on and they can read. The same kind of thing goes with vocabulary. You're talking to your kids all the time and that sort of thing, and then eventually the kid starts talking back to you and interacting with you, and it's just a really cool thing to see. So a 2-year-old, like I said, the vocabulary goes from 150 to 300 words, right? And the 2-year-old can usually use between 1 and 3 word sentences. The mean is like 1.2 words. If you can have a point 2 of a word. The 2-year-old begins to use pronouns like I, me, and us. 2/3 of the words can be understood by a stranger, generally speaking. So like I said before, with the 1-year-old, when you go along, you may or may not be able to understand everything they say. Different kids are kind of different. The experience with my kids was that my kids by the time they were 2, you could understand almost everything that they were saying, like a stranger could. When they were talking to people they didn't know. And they can also name a number of objects, that they've had experience with. So if they have a dog, they can name their dog. They know the name of their dog, that sort of thing. Right? They can talk about their siblings. They can name objects in the area: chairs, couches, cars, that sort of thing. So anything that they've had a lot of interaction with. So let's see what it looks like to have a 2-year-old talk to you.
All right. Can you smile? Is your cereal good?
I like my toast.
You like your toast?
I like my pajamas.
You like your pajamas, huh?
I like my purple blanket.
Who's eating your purple blanket? Nobody's eating your purple blanket. Is the cereal good? What kind of cereal do you have?
2 1 3.
213?
See?
Uh-huh. Oh, I see. That looks delicious.
So see, we can hear and understand a lot of what she's saying, right? But I didn't catch that purple blanket thing until Dad explained it to us, right?
It's Cheerios, right? Hey, you need to wipe your face. You have a napkin? Do you need a napkin?
I got it.
You got it? Okay.
He's like, I got this, with her hand.
All right.
That's a 2-year-old
Your
for you.
breakfast looks delicious.
Is the lesson in yours?
Mine was delicious, too. I had some raisin bread and some toast. And I'm going to have a little water.
Very cute, right? So we're getting more and more interactive as we get older, right? So when we're 3 years old, the vocabulary is increased now to 1,000 words. So in the space of a year and a half, we've gone from like 5 words to 1,000 words, right? 90% of the words should be able to be understood by a stranger. The kid's more articulate and has pronounced a lot of the words so that they don't have, sort of funny pronunciations. My son used to pronounce movie. He would say movie. So they don't pronounce things like that. They pronounce it sort of like in the standard way that everybody does in their circle of interaction, right? So the way their parents respond to things. That's why kids these age have like adorable little accents if they're from the South or whatever. 3-year-olds also can use pronouns like I, you, and me, and prepositions. Prepositions are like in, on, under, around, anything a cat can do, as my English teacher would say. And so, just basically the 3-year-old is getting more sophisticated. So you want to take a look at a 3-year-old? Let's do it. Okay, so here's a 3-year-old explaining the first Star Wars movie.
Well, okay. The Sand people capture robots and drive and sell them in broad sale, kind of like broad sale, but except they're selling robots. And no one's gonna
So, I understood almost all of what you said. And I don't know if the sound is up, but, if it's not, you can click on the PowerPoint yourself and click into this one and sort of listen to it for yourself. But it's, you know, adorable and very cute, but, mostly understandable. Still kind of, simple language that she's using, but that's to be expected of her age. So there we go. So we're growing in sophistication until we get to 5 years old, right? 5-year-olds generally know their letters. They can count up to 10, maybe even higher. They understand simple time concepts like yesterday, today, afternoon, tonight, that sort of thing, and can understand what that means when you tell them we're going to do something later on tonight, or we're going to do, or we did something yesterday, right? They can understand the difference between yesterday and today and tomorrow. They can use compound complex sentences, which means you have a couple of subjects and a couple of verbs, like Juan and Francisco went to the mall and then to Jamba Juice, right? That's a compound complex sentence. So just more sophistication, really, right? So let's check out what a 5-year-old sounds like. Let's see how our 5-year-old sounds and see if you can spot the differences between the 5-year-old and the 3-year-old we just talked to last time. Or we just saw last time.
Michaela interview, 5 years old, January 18th, 2011. Michaela, who's your best friend?
Your mama,
Yeah? And what do you always call me?
BFF, and sister and mom.
And you tell me that even 20 years from now, that it's gonna always be the same?
Yeah.
And you're gonna still wanna hang out with Ma at the mall? You're gonna still wanna go places with me?
Yep.
You won't be embarrassed by old Ma?
So you can tell that you can kind of understand her a whole lot better, and that she's a little more sophisticated in her use of language, right?
Only if you're funny.
You're gonna say embarrassing?
No, just joking.
You were gonna say embarrassing. What do I do that embarrasses you?
Nothing.
But I might when I'm old? Okay, stop
Yeah.
looking in the mirror. Stop looking in the mirror. Turn around.
5-year-olds do have a
Okay.
short attention span, however.
Okay, so you're saying that even when you're older, we're gonna be BFFs, and you're gonna love me forever, and you're never gonna tell me like I hate you or anything like that.
Yeah, she got that on tape. That will be important later on. So you can tell that kids, in just a really short time, grow in sophistication in ways that are, frankly, kind of amazing. All right, so let's talk about the two theories of how language is acquired to answer our question. Now, we've seen kind of how it happens over a time span of, maybe 5 years or so, right? But there are two theories about how we learn all the rules and pronunciation and all that stuff about language. We hear it all the time, right, from everyone around us. And the question that these two theories answer is, how do we figure out the rules of language, right? How do we figure out that you say David ate the nachos and not the nachos ate David? Those are two totally separate ideas, right? If you put them together wrong, it's going to be a completely different meaning, right? Or ate David the nachos, right? That doesn't make any sense. So how do you figure out how things work together, and how do you figure out grammar rules? Those are the things that these two theories we're trying to figure out, right? So do you listen to others to figure it out, or do you think that we have a special layer or a special language center in the brain? Let's think about this for a second. Do you just listen to others and figure it out? Or do you have something in your mind that turns on and allows you to, form language and form compound complex sentences? The first theory is called nativist theory. One of the most influential nativists is Noam Chomsky. And he would say that just hearing language, it's not enough. That we learn language despite incomplete information from our environment. So there's all sorts of information coming in from our environment, right? Different people have different ways of speaking. Different people have, some people use correct grammar all the time, other people don't. Some people, have like a strange way of speaking, or like idioms that they use, or sayings that they do all the time, that are just kind of quirky and different. Um, and so Chomsky would say that we learn language, our own form of language, despite all these other idiosyncrasies that other people have, right? And he would say that some aspects of people are innate, are inside all of us, right? Some aspects of people are just inside of us. He would say that not all knowledge is gained from our senses, right? From just perception. That we have a structure in our minds as soon as we are born that develops over time. And he would say the evidence of this is that we understand cause and effect. We learn to understand if you touch something, it is hot. And it burns, and we scream in pain. And that we avoid high places. It's scary, and you could fall in it yourself. And he called it a language acquisition device. He said that every person had a language acquisition device, and it's something you're born with, and that it's based off of instinctual kinds of learning. That you don't get direct instruction. It's not like somebody sits down with you and says, "Okay, David, we're going to learn that subjects come before verbs, and verbs come before objects, right? So that we can make the sentence, David ate the nachos." He would say that this structure in your brain picks up on that from other people talking, and then you learn that over time. So this theory is all about having something inside you that turns on and is able to produce the language that you have now, right? So it turns on at different stages. It turns on a little bit at 4 months, and then it's developing a little bit. By the time you're 5, it's fully engaged, and now you're able to do compound complex sentences, right? Let's contrast that with the other theory, empiricist theory. And the empiricists, they believe that knowledge comes from sensory input that you experience. So the only way that you learn, according to the empiricist theory, is that information is coming in and hitting you in the face, in the ears, in the eyes, in the nose, in the mouth. And they emphasize, evidence and scientific methods. So they say that you learn through sort of a trial and error, testing hypotheses kind of way, right? They believe that all humans are tabula rasa, which is Latin for blank slate, and that you start off with nothing. You're just totally imprintable, right? And then as you learn things and you try things out and you test your theories, right? Hey, if I say word, my dad laughs at me, right? So start off as a blank slate, but then, through all this sensory input, you start to, you start to be imprinted. You start to have things written down on your blank slate, right? And eventually, you end up being like this whole giant book of information, right? But you start off with nothing, like a sponge, right? You're just soaking everything in. They also believe that parents and caregivers, the people who are interacting with the kid, they adopt what's called child-directed speech. And different people have different versions of their child-directed speech. Like child-directed speech from me sounds different than it does from my wife, sounds different than it does from your parents, sounds different than it does from your grandparents, sounds different than it does from almost anybody else, right? But the idea here is that you are saying things for the kid's benefit. Some people talk baby talk, like, oh, you're so cute, you're such a little kitty, baby, you're such a little cutie. Other people point things out to kids. We're driving in the car, and my daughter's in the back, and I say, hey, look at those trees. Some of them don't have leaves. Others of them do, right? The ones that don't have leaves, those are different from the ones that do. What's so different about them? And she would say, well, like all their leaves are on the ground. And she said, the other ones have little needles for leaves, That's interesting. And I said, that's right. Those are called evergreen trees. And she said, well, what are the other kinds called? And I said, those are called deciduous trees. They drop their leaves so that the snow doesn't land on them and break the branches, right? And so it's not like I would just be driving down the road and go, oh, look at the deciduous trees there, when I'm by myself, right? I do that for the benefit of my daughter who's learning about those sorts of things, right? And so, child-directed speech is, anywhere in that kind of spectrum, right? The goal here, though, of the parent or the caregiver is to teach the kid about how things are in the real world, right? So they talk about, you could talk about like my example of the trees and stuff, the labels for things, that happens a lot, what's this called and what's this called, that sort of thing. Or it could be, saying, like kids make mistakes with verbs all the time, especially the weird ones. Like my daughter used to say run, I runned over there, and we would say no, I mean it's ran, and then so by correcting her a couple of times, then little by little she understands now that she says ran instead of run when she wants to talk about past tense, right? It's just things like that. Another empiricist theory to kind of go along with this, a more specific one, is called social interactionist theory. And that says that we learn language as well as the caregiver interacts with us. So this theory says that you learn language as good as your environment, right? So if your parents talk to you a lot and the people around you talk to you a lot and encourage you to talk and experiment and test new words out and are constantly interacting with you, then you're going to be the same way. You're going to be a person who's kind of outgoing and talks a lot. If, however, your parents were introverts and they never really said a whole lot and they didn't interact with you in that same way, then you have a much greater likelihood of being an introvert yourself and of just being kind of quiet and not being the gregarious, outgoing type. And they would also say that, is that we are blank slates, they would say, social interactionists would say, and they say that the way that we learn language is by hearing something and then trying to mimic it. So if you hear an interesting phrase, you would mimic it, right? If you hear something you don't know, you would ask a question about it, you would mimic it, you would talk about it, you would use it in a sentence, you would probably use it incorrectly for a while until you mastered it, right? You would make mistakes, but then you would correct yourself or get corrected by the other person, right, the caregiver. And that's how you would learn. So two separate theories. I want you to think about, which of these theories sounds right to you? Is it the empiricist theory, that we're all sort of blank slates or sponges that soak up all the experience that we have? Or do we have this section in our brain that turns on? That's why, when we go through the stages, most 4-year-olds can do this and most 6-year-olds can do that. And you know what I'm saying? So do we have a language center in the brain like the nativists believe, or do you think that it sounds more accurate that we're blank slates and we just input experience and then we output what we've learned from that experience? What do you think is the right method? That's what we're going to talk about this week in our webinar. So, when you have questions on this, let me know. Come to the webinar on Friday at 11, and we are going to talk about it. All right, guys. Have a great week, and we'll see you around.